You know, it would be great if ATEEZ could stop dropping comebacks faster than I can make these videos. Like, just chill, okay? I need time to catch up. Hey everyone, it's Catching Tease here. Welcome to my channel where today I am finally continuing my ATEEZ vocalist deep dive with a different member this time because Yeosang was a menace and outlaw, so we had to do a bit of backtracking there. But this time we are moving on to talk about Wooyoung. I figured since I started with Yeosang, I would work my way up from least to most lines and also just shine a light on them first because I feel like they get forgotten in discussions about vocals and I'm not okay with that. We're here to fix that. Really quick, for those of you who don't know, this is a series. I started with Yeosang, did 2 videos on him, and I'm going to tell you to go and watch at least the first one if you haven't yet, because I am going to refer to some concepts on tone that I discussed there in this video, so it's important that you know that stuff. But as I said there, this is a topic where I can really dig deeper than most people because I do have slight vocal experience. I'm not a professional, but I do have enough of a background to speak on this kind of stuff. I've also realized a little bit too late that I should probably start using more live clips because they're a more accurate measurement of vocal ability, so I will be using those where I can now. Full videos will be linked in the description, and the titles of each song will be listed along the top of the screen as they play. So with that housekeeping out of the way, let's get into what I see as Wooyoung's main trait in ATEEZ's vocal line. When I was going through all of the vocalists and picking a defining feature of each, it was almost immediate what Wooyoung's was going to be. To me, he's one of the easiest members to pick out of a song because his voice is just so light compared to the rest of them. He is like textbook tenor with the way that his voice is just so clear and it rings out above everyone else's. To anyone who isn't familiar with ATEEZ, Wooyoung's voice may not seem super light when you listen to him on his own. But if you put him next to the other members, it becomes a lot more obvious. This is mainly because he's way more nasal than most of the other members. In fact, I would say that he's the most naturally nasal sounding of the group besides Hongjoong, who is only a sub-vocalist. A lot of what he sings sits in his mask, aka that forward placement that I talked about. He sounded really nasal in the rookie days. But listening back, I think it was more of a production issue. He's definitely had more training, but not much has changed about his placement. He's just learned to better support his sound, so that's why I think it's more on the vocal mixing side of things. He feels like less of a sore thumb and more like a break from the heaviness of the other vocalists, which puts him in a very important position and gives him a lot to experiment with. He can have this floatier feeling to him, or he can add a sultrier touch, but he naturally is going to stand out in a discography like ATEEZ's, and he can exaggerate his light voice even further by making his tone airier. But what does that mean? Well, it's time for Crash Course Tone Lesson number 2! Last time we talked about placement, bright versus dark, and this time we're talking about airflow and compression. Airflow and compression works on a spectrum, but there aren't really labels for either end, at least that I know of, so I'm just going to call it focused and unfocused. Focused sound you can kind of think of as a laser. It's just beaming straight out of you and it is pure sound. It's very strong and solid, nothing fogging up the tone. And this is achieved by changing how you use your air. You can think of it like blowing out a candle. That strong puff of air has enough force behind it to put it out because your air is focused and compressed. It gets a little more complicated when singing because you don't want to compress it to the point that your sound becomes unsupported due to a lack of airflow, but this is just a general idea of how it works. Now, unfocused sound you can think of as fuzzy or foggy. You can literally hear the air in the tone because the air isn't as compressed, so it seeps into the tone. This is generally discouraged for vocalists just because it doesn't sound as full or satisfying. It's also a way less efficient use of air, so you can't sing for nearly as long without needing to take a breath, and it can cause strain on your voice if done improperly, but it's something that a lot of professional artists do stylistically. For example, Billie Eilish. It's one of those things where you have to know the basics before you can start playing with it. So instead of blowing on a hot drink, this airflow is more like fogging up a window with your breath. There's still air coming out to support the sound, but it's way more thinned out, which causes the tone to quote-unquote weaken in a way. There's actually a pretty good example of focused and unfocused tone in this one clip of Jongho and San singing on a variety show. Listen to how San's voice sounds foggier and has less focus than Jongho's, even though they're singing the exact same notes. So that's the big idea here. Now to apply it to Wooyoung. Wooyoung doesn't sing unfocused super often, but it's really pretty when he does, and I find it interesting that he does this with both low and high notes.
Oh baby, you gotta stop. Say that you're calling. I told you that I am picking up. 모두 잘못 보고 있어. Oh no. 아직 그게 진짜 멋이라고.
Usually singers only do it for higher notes because it's just easier on that end of things, falsetto and whatnot, but he actually tends to go airier on his lower notes, and it's not because his range gives out, so I don't know why that is, but it's a fun note. But an even more fun note is that Wooyoung has started doing this outside of their slower songs recently and has expanded to their more intense songs. And I'm not saying that I'm in love with Wooyoung's part in Django's pre-chorus because of the cheeky vibe he brings, but I'm in love with Wooyoung's part in Django's pre-chorus because of the cheeky vibe he brings.
You know what?
Oh, and also the bridge too. And they sort of did the same thing with Ariba when they dropped Will. So he has all of these interesting qualities to his voice that sets his lighter voice apart, but there's more to it than that. All of that said, that absolutely does not mean that Wooyoung is only good for floaty soft notes. He can have power when he focuses his sound, and it can give his delivery serious emotional impact, which is why he's so good in ballads or slower songs. He can do both the gentle parts and also the more powerful ones. In fact, I think my and many people's all-time favorite lines from him are in Mist when he's belting out, "So please tell me it's alright in this uneasy mist."
So please, 말해줘요 it's alright. 불안하니 안개서.
Just a quick note about that clip though, that is not raw live vocal that you're hearing. It's from their official recording of a concert, which in this case has the vocals touched up a bit, so it is still live, it's just not raw because they've done some post-production on it. If you want to hear the raw live vocal over a backtrack, I also have a clip for that, but you'll have to ignore the fans singing along in the background. There's this desperation to it that sounds so good. Now, for some reason, they primarily kept his powerful lines to ballads, but there seemed to be a point where they realized, hey, maybe we should try this in our other songs. And I think that this inflection point happened right around the poppening. We'll go with that. The poppening. AKA ATEEZ's performance of Papaya at KCON 2022, which if you haven't seen, highly recommend, because while the wider K-pop community was going solid performance, nicely done ATEEZ, ATEEZ were in shambles over, well, many things, but mainly Wooyoung actually having lines, like complex singing lines at the center of the song. Crazy. I love this performance, and I love Wooyoung having the chorus, but I must point something out here. Wooyoung is lip-syncing a good portion of his lines in the chorus. Not all of it, just some, but I have to point it out because I don't want to be giving credit where it isn't due. Just pay attention to his lips here. I mean, he literally forgets that he's supposed to be singing here, and it just cracks me up every time I watch it because, like, I know you're not used to lip syncing, but you gotta at least move your lips. He's just struggle busting so hard, and I find it hilarious every time. But he does sing parts of this live, specifically this part toward the beginning that I'm obsessed with because of how he switches from his falsetto into a stronger mixed chest voice at the end. Regardless, the first time I heard their version of Papaya, I was like, wow, Wooyoung sounds fantastic on the backtrack. Wouldn't it be great if Wooyoung got a chorus like that in ATEEZ's actual discography? Cue the next year and a half, which has been an insane run for Wooyoung. But it's not like he just now became capable of these kinds of lines. You can see bits of his belting ability before the poppening. Another quick note on that last clip there, Immortal Songs does the same thing that I mentioned earlier, where they give you the live vocals, but they touch them up in the official recording that they release to the world on YouTube, so take that with a grain of salt. But there's also all of these clips floating around the internet of him just bursting into song, and like, guys, this is what he sounds like just screwing around. He sounds so good, and he's not even really trying, and I would just love to hear more like this. But if you still don't believe in Wooyoung's strength as a vocalist, you can look at all the times that he's sung similar or even the exact same lines as Jungho. Now, don't get me wrong, Jungho is clearly the more powerful vocalist, hence why he is the main vocal, but the fact that they trust Wooyoung to carry those same lines speaks underlying volumes about his vocal ability, and it's definitely something they only started to lean into and utilize more recently. And I know I talked a ton about Wooyoung being the light in ATEEZ to contrast everyone else, even in the cases where he is giving his all, but there's this interesting role reversal that happens in Cyberpunk in regard to this whole strength thing. Starting off the song, you get San, Yuno, Songhwa, and Yosang all singing about as soft as they get. But then Wooyoung comes in at basically full force with slightly higher notes. And it creates this purposeful swap because the first four, who are usually the gut punch vocalists, are singing soft and airy and dark and low, but Wooyoung's naturally bright voice comes into contrast it all right away. Until the very end of his part, he is the strong vocalist for the verse. Of course, that's immediately null and void because then Mingi and then the chorus, but Wooyoung is still the one starting that ramp up, so I am taking it as a win. And even when the other members aren't pulling back like that to let him shine, he still has ways to make his voice more powerful and sit at the forefront with them. One of his favorite ways to do this, particularly in the last couple of years, is by adding texture to his voice. If you watch any of their performances, there's a chance you'll hear him roughen up his voice in this gritty growl. The notes have to be a little lower in range for him to be able to do this without absolutely destroying his voice, but it's always a treat to hear, and it's a great way for him to fit in with the rest of the pack when needed. However, fitting in with the pack isn't always the goal, and I find that particularly applicable when talking about his friend of nearly a decade. In and outside of music, in just about every way, these two are total opposites, and it is wild having them in the same group together. I mean, I literally defined Yeosang as depth and Wooyoung as light. It doesn't get much more polarized than that. Where Yeosang is full and lush and low, Wooyoung is clear and bright and ringing like a bell. Whenever they sing similar lines, you'll notice that Wooyoung often sounds softer, and some of that is because his voice isn't as full as Yeosang's. Yeosang naturally has a lot more heft and thickness to his voice, whereas Wooyoung doesn't. This probably is going to be a weird analogy, but if we think of ATEEZ's vocal line as a cake, stay with me here, Yeosang is like the frosting and Wooyoung the sprinkles. Both very important finishing touches, but there's a lot more substance to the frosting than the sprinkles, and what makes the sprinkles so special is how slight they are. As a decoration, they have very different purposes, and that's exactly why you'll want both. Hopefully that made sense, but basically, even if they're singing the same thing in the same way, you still hear an obvious difference between them. On those last clips especially, you can tell the difference between their chest voices. Wooyoung's sits way higher than Yeosang's, so he can belt those lines with more ease, hence why he sounds so much lighter than Yeosang in higher ranges particularly. And you'll also notice that Wooyoung is comfortable singing more nasally, whereas Yeosang's voice tends to sit further back.
I'll be there for you. I'll be safe for you. 아픔이란 누구나 다 똑같이 느끼는 거라고. 아픔이란 누구나 다 똑같이 느끼는 거라고. 헬라를 가지고 야 이거 미친 놈. 아야야야 춤만 춰.
And even when Yeosang is singing about as nasally as he can, it's still going to sound way heavier and deeper than Wooyoung because Wooyoung's voice is just more attuned to that kind of singing. Their voices are just built so differently, which is why I love it when they lean into those differences in every way possible. What can I say? I'm a sucker for contrast, and the final kicker is utilizing their range differences. When everything compounds on top of itself and they play into Yeosang and Wooyoung's strongest ranges, they really help each other shine. But they also have to be careful with it because you don't want to disrupt a song too much. Particularly, the best example is the subunit song It's You with Wooyoung, Yeosang, and San. Somehow, Wooyoung and Yeosang never sing next to each other the entire time, unless you count Wooyoung high-noting over Yeosang in the final chorus, but I don't. In a song that's over 3 minutes with only 3 vocalists, that's insane, and it has to be intentional because it makes sense. It's You is heavily influenced by R&B and is supposed to be smooth all the way through. In this song, it wouldn't make sense to have that kind of disruption by putting those two next to each other, so they use San as a buffer between them. And now that I've mentioned other members, I also want to shout out Seonghwa here because he sometimes has a similar contrast with Wooyoung. He naturally has a fuller voice.
너는 혹시 알아 저 반짝이는 거 함께하는 이 밤에만 보이는 걸 신진한 렐로 future 가나다른 6월 Here we get forever 고급스러 your myself 매점 매로 yourself 도둑해 forever 이 맛을 구오실 때요 이 맛을 구오실 때요
Wooyoung tends to be more nasal.
이 모든 게 현실이 맞다고 네가 서 있는 이곳은 진짜 감당할 수 없는 힘이 넘쳐 감춰진 어둠은 여길 덮쳐 피어린 자리에 남은 슬픔은 비가 돼 Follow my voice 널 크게 소리 질러 비가 내 Let it shine Let it shine
And they have that sweet, sweet range difference. But Seonghwa is much more multifaceted, so this isn't always the case, hence why I wanted to focus on Yeosang because he specializes in everything opposite to Wooyoung. That kind of dynamic is much more consistent between them. And now that I've mentioned the topic of range, let's talk about Wooyoung's. I didn't realize before making this video, but Wooyoung's got a much larger range than I thought. I was under the impression that he only sings in a higher range, probably because that's where he really shines. I mean, I've pretty much already talked about all of his high notes, but there's an unexpected kicker here that I want to address. Answer. Some of you are probably very confused right now because he only has like 4 lines in that song, but stay with me here, okay? Because we're going beyond the main vocals, and as an Answer enthusiast, I never hear anyone talk about this, and I have had enough. It's not quite in the backing vocals, but it definitely isn't in what I would call the main vocal line. We're looking at the very end of the bridge here. If you're an avid Answer lover like myself, you might already know where I'm going with this. There's something just really neat here that I would like to share. Listen close. Did you hear it? Did you hear that note in the back that is higher than Jongho's high note? Because if not, listen again. It comes in a couple of beats after Jongho hits the beginning of his high note. It's never been confirmed, but I'm pretty sure that's Wooyoung singing that high note because no one else in ATEEZ sounds that bright on a belty high note. So either it's him or they brought in someone else to sing the backing vocals there, which I'm not gonna lie, it does sound like it could be Maddox or Lee's, and they are known to make appearances in their backing vocals, but Maddox is not listed in the credits, and I think it sounds much more like Wooyoung than Lee's, so let me continue with my Wooyoung agenda in peace. Thank you. So that's super impressive, right? But here's the thing, he can also sing way lower than I realized. Some of these I didn't even know it was Wooyoung until I looked it up.
어디선가 말을 꺼내 우리 배는 변도로만 가 여기 멋진 규칙
So yeah, dude's got some range, and I would like to formally apologize for somehow not realizing that sooner. Probably because it's very rare that they use his lower range. After all, they have several other options that are stronger down there, but it's worth recognizing that it's something he is capable of.
On my body I don't wanna stop until the break of dawn 널 향한 내 무대는 끝이 없어.
So what do I want to see out of Wooyoung in the future? My biggest thing for him is I want him to work on his stability and pitch control because when you listen to him live, he isn't quite on the same level as the rest of ATEEZ, which, to be fair, is an insanely high bar. He just kind of sticks out from the rest of the group sometimes because he is often given those higher and more difficult notes, which he can handle when he's not dancing. It's just that, you know, He's also a main dancer for ATEEZ, and that's tough to do both. You kinda have to pick one to focus on more than the other, which can be seen with like how Jungho can dance like no one's business. But he has to hold back on stage or not dance certain parts, so then he has the breath support for all those high notes. Wooyoung just works the opposite way. He has more of an inclination toward dancing, so he focuses his energy on that, and his pitch accuracy and stability might suffer a bit as a result. Understandable, because singing and dancing at full energy is tough, and not everyone can be Jung Yuno, but that's a discussion for later. So I feel like he could benefit from a little more training, but honestly, I just appreciate the fact that he sings live pretty consistently, and he's been doing it since debut. Another thing I really want to see is more of his falsetto in title tracks because it is gorgeous. Oh my god. Like, I heard him sing Be the Light Halazia in Halazia and I ascended. Same thing for the I'm in Love part in Inception. I just love the angst and variety that it brings to their loud and noisy title tracks, and I want more of it, specifically from Wooyoung because I think it suits him best. I've found that my favorite ATEEZ title tracks often tend to be ones where his voice is utilized as that floatier sound to add another layer of dimension to their songs. But if they don't want to do that and instead want him to sing in a similar style and range as everyone else, I would love for them to make up the difference with harmonies, because we know that Wooyoung's voice is just naturally more delicate. So what if instead of making him push to match everyone else, we instead bulk up his parts using backing vocals? That way he still gets to keep the most interesting qualities of his voice without sounding weak in comparison. A great example of this is in verse 1 of Halazia. San's voice is really intense here, so adding even just a couple of harmonies helps bolster Wooyoung, and listen to the way that the harmonies creep in and stack at the end here. It creates this big swell that's so good, and I want them to do this more and push it further because I feel like the results could be captivating. But overall, I'm pretty happy with where he is now. If I had made this video even like 2 years ago, I would have had a laundry list of complaints here, but I love the direction that he's taken, and watching him grow over the past couple of years has been a treat. So that's what I have for Wooyoung. I hope that this video helps people recognize him more as a vocalist. We all know he's an amazing performer and dancer, but I feel like his singing gets overlooked just because he's so good at those other two things. He plays a super integral role in ATEEZ vocally, and I wanted to highlight that, but that does it for this video. Thank you so much for watching. Let me know what you thought about my analysis, or if there's anything you would like to add or change. I would love to talk more about this stuff with you guys, or if you just want to scream about ATEEZ in the comments together, I'm down for that too. The next video in this series is going to be about Yuno, so if there's anything that you want to see in that, drop those suggestions too, and I will do my best to include them. These videos also might get a little longer from this point on, just because the other members actually have lines, so be prepared. Lord knows I'm trying to mentally prepare for that, but if you liked the video, please drop a like and subscribe to the channel, as it really helps me out. Thanks again for watching, and I will talk to you all next time. Bye!